So, remember how the flaky pastry of egg tarts of Macau tastes like? Well, there is a technique to that. In French, it is called Pate Feuilletee, which means leafy pastry, and leafy it is. With butter cold but spreadable, whip the butter at medium then high speed. This phase of the process is important because the butter is made double in bulk. This creates the space in between the pastry leaves. Likewise, with air pockets, this traps air which will later expand with heat, separating the leaves into multiple layers. The more butter, it creates a richer product. When it melts, it fries the pastry. In a bowl, combine salt and flour. Pour 1/3 of the water on the flour and using a rubber spatula and with a peripheral circular motion, incorporate the water in the flour. As soon as the flour becomes pasty and the dough is just beginning to hold but still floury, pour the next 1/3 of water and repeat the process. Do this again with the final 1/3 of the water. The dough should hold, but still with semblance of floury surface and somewhat with small bits of flour separating. This consistency is just right for the second part, which is butter incorporation. With a sheet of parchment paper on the table, dust the surface with about a small handful of flour. Place the flour pastry on top and roll into a rough square. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. On this, spread the butter and taking care to leave about 1 inch of the edges free of any fat. Fold the 4 corners into the middle, creating quarter triangular folds, sealing the envelope of butter. To this, add more flour and lay the second sheet of parchment paper on top. If the envelope of butter becomes warm that it is unmanageable to handle, chill it in the refrigerator for about 5 to 10 minutes. Remove from the refrigerator and roll evenly using the rolling pin. Remove the parchment papers and keeping in mind 3 portions, fold the outer 2 portions into the middle portion. Reposition the pastry, apply more flour to guarantee minimal sticking, and the whole pastry in between the parchment paper, roll it once again. If you have some more whipped butter left over, you may choose to incorporate that within the middle and second portions of the fold and seal with the 3rd fold. Again, roll using the rolling pin with parchment papers at the sides. At any time that the pastry becomes difficult to handle, refrigerate for about 5 to 10 minutes before rolling. Likewise, be sure you use parchment papers since this will minimize sticking of the pastry when it is time to roll and fold. As you fold and roll the pastry several times, you are creating basically leaves of pastry interspersed with butter in between. Because the pastry leaves become thinner with each fold and roll, there is a tendency for the first leaf to break when the parchment paper is peeled off. Now, don't worry, this is normal, but you may use a sharp fruit knife to scrape the pastry leaf from the paper. To minimize sticking, be sure you flour your parchment paper each time you roll. Note that with each folding, you multiply the leaves by the base of 3. So the first fold is 3, second is 3 by 3, third is 3 by 3 by 3. And if one does the same procedure 6 times, it is therefore 6 by 3 by 3 multiplied by 3, another 3, and another 3, equal to 729. Do we really need this much leaves? No. And probably one can end at the 4th fold, 81, or 5th, 243. But you get the idea. Once the folding and the rolling is done, the puff pastry is ready. And what more could puff pastry be great than in beef Wellington? Well, the recipe follows. First of all, you have to remove all the ligaments and fat from the outsides of the beef tenderloin. This is a no-no in beef Wellington because it is what makes the beef not tender at all if one wants the definition of tender to be in that word. Now be sure you trim all the fat, all ligaments, and save them to be marinated for some other recipe like beef teriyaki. Now they are tender alright, but not for a delicate thing such as beef Wellington. Next, salt and pepper to taste. Honest opinion? Err on the side of salting and peppering it more than usual. When the taste of the beef mixes with the pastry, it will be neutralized to just right. With very high heat, Sear the beef at all sides until rare. The higher the heat, the better because it will caramelize the sides while the insides are raw, which should be the case. Once that is done, set aside. Rest then, if possible, cool in refrigerator until well cold. Do not freeze. Chop the mushrooms to very fine. If you do not have the skills and or the patience to do it, use a food processor. With butter sliced to pat sizes and the mushrooms chopped very well, place all in a pot. Simmer under low heat until all liquids have evaporated to a spreadable paste-like spread. Now it's time to prepare your beef Wellington. With your prepared pastry as the base, place the refrigerated beef in the middle. Spread some of the mushrooms on the top and sides. Then, place and distribute slices of foie gras on top. Wrap the pastry all over and seal at the sides. Bake for 400 Fahrenheit oven for about 30 minutes and broil at the final minutes for a delicate brown. The butter from the puff pastry will melt as the air incorporated in the butter, as it is whipped earlier, would expand, giving that high layered look, baking and frying the thin flour paste to a crisp. For a more appetizing and more impressive look, brush with egg wash before broiling. The shine and the brownish crust would surely make the dish more attractive. Now, Merlot sauce is nothing more than an equal volume, not by weight or by dry wet cups, but by equal dimensional volume of Merlot to white sugar. So, if you are using 1 cup to measure the Merlot, be sure you use the same cup to measure the sugar. With that, boil under low heat and simmer to 1/2 the volume. Essentially, it is nothing more than reduced sweetened Merlot. It is good for beef Wellington and good for some other things like dessert. Now, a drizzle is just what you need. Rest for about 10 minutes. Still warm, slice and spread a bit of chopped parsley leaves. Now serve this with Merlot reduction sauce. A slice of warm beef Wellington, some parsley flakes, and a drizzle of Merlot sauce. Now, ain't life wonderful?